The first automation project goes live. It works. The team is excited. Leadership is impressed. Someone puts together a slide deck showing the time saved, the cost reduced, the hours recovered. And then almost without exception, the wrong conclusion gets drawn. If this works here, it works everywhere. That moment right there is where most AI initiatives begin to fall apart. Not with a failure, with a success that gets misread. I've seen this pattern play out in enough companies now that it's no longer a surprise, but it still causes real damage. And the businesses that get hit hardest are often the ones that moved fastest in the beginning. This is an AI clone of Ronald, founder of Data Wonder. That's intentional. We build and deploy AI systems for real businesses, insurance companies, accounting firms, medical clinics, and using AI as part of how we communicate is consistent with how we work every day. This channel exists because most AI content is either tutorials or speculation. What happens inside companies after AI gets deployed? The organizational dynamics, the second-order effects, the decisions that determine whether any of it sticks. That's what we cover here. If that's useful to you, subscribe. New content every week, no hype. Let me take you back to that first win. The scenario is almost always the same. A company identifies a repetitive process, something that takes a lot of time, doesn't require much judgment, and creates a clear bottleneck. They automate it. The results are measurable. Hours saved, fewer errors, lower cost per transaction. The ROI is visible in the first month. This is genuinely good. It's exactly what AI should do. But here's what happens next. Leadership sees the slide deck. They see the numbers, and they start asking a perfectly logical question. Where else can we do this? That question isn't wrong. The problem is the assumption embedded inside it. The assumption that what worked in one place will work in a similar way somewhere else. And the reason has nothing to do with the technology. There's a pattern underneath this that I want to come back to, because it explains not just why early wins mislead, but why the organizations most confident in their AI strategy are often the most exposed. I'll get to that. But first, let's stay with the mechanics of what actually happens when you try to scale. You take the model from Project 1. You identify a second process that looks similar. Similar volume, similar structure, similar outcome. You hand it to the same team or a different one. You expect roughly the same results. What you find instead is that the second project takes 3 times as long, runs into data quality issues nobody anticipated, creates friction with a department that wasn't consulted, and produces outcomes that are technically correct, but practically unusable. Has this happened in your organization? If it has, you've probably been told it's an implementation problem or a change management problem. Those are all symptoms. The actual cause is something else. The first project worked because it had a rare combination of factors that made it unusually automatable. Clean data, clear ownership, a process that was already well-defined, a team that was motivated to make it work, and a business context where the output was easy to measure. None of those things are common, and almost none of them transfer automatically to the next project. What the first win does, and this is where it gets dangerous, is it creates an expectation based on an exception. The organization now believes that AI projects should move fast, produce clear ROI, and face minimal resistance, because that's what happened the first time. When the second project doesn't match those expectations, the response isn't, let's recalibrate. It's something went wrong. And that's when the search for blame starts. If you've been in a larger organization, you've seen this. The first success gets credited to the technology. The second failure gets blamed on the people. That's backwards. The first success was always partly about the people, the specific team, the specific process owner, the specific manager who gave it space to run. Strip any of those elements out, and the first project probably fails too. But by the time anyone figures that out, the damage is already done. Confidence in AI has taken a hit. The team that ran the first project is now expected to rescue the second. internal politics have entered the picture, and the whole initiative starts to look less like a capability and more like a problem to be managed. That's the real cost of misreading an early win, not the failed second project. It's what that failure does to the organizational will to keep going. But there's something deeper here that most companies never get to, something that happens at the leadership level, not the execution level. And this is actually the part that causes the most long-term damage. When the first project succeeds, leadership often does something well-intentioned but structurally harmful. They assign ownership of AI broadly. Everyone should be thinking about AI opportunities. Each department should identify use cases. We're building an AI-first culture. These are statements that sound like empowerment. What they actually are is a way of distributing responsibility without distributing capability, context, or decision-making authority. What happens when everyone owns AI? Nobody owns AI. Process owners start identifying use cases without knowing what's actually buildable. IT gets flooded with requests that don't have business cases attached. Vendors get invited in to fill the gaps. Each department starts going in a slightly different direction. 6 months later, the company has 12 AI initiatives, 3 different platforms, inconsistent data governance, and no coherent picture of what any of it is actually producing. And the person at the top looks at all of it and says, "Why isn't this working? It worked the first time." This is the second-order effect of early success. Not just that expectations are miscalibrated, but that success creates organizational sprawl that actively undermines the next attempt. The companies that avoid this are the ones that treat the first win as a learning opportunity rather than a proof of concept. They ask different questions after it works. Not, "Where else can we do this?" but "Why did this work specifically? What was it about that process that made it automatable? What data conditions had to be true? What organizational conditions had to be true? Who had to be in the room? What would have caused it to fail?" That analysis done rigorously without the distortion of success bias is worth more than the first project itself, because it gives you a repeatable model, not just a repeatable tool. The difference matters enormously. A repeatable tool runs one process. A repeatable model tells you which processes to run, in which order, with which conditions, with which governance structure. That's what scales. Most companies skip that analysis entirely. They move straight from success to expansion. They transfer the tool without transferring the understanding. And then they wonder why the second project felt like starting from scratch. There's also a quieter version of this problem that I see specifically in regulated industries. Insurance companies, accounting firms, medical clinics, the organizations I work with most closely often get an early win in a relatively low-stakes area: a document routing process, an appointment scheduling flow, an internal reporting task. The win is real. The enthusiasm is real. And then someone decides the next project should be more ambitious, closer to the core of the business, closer to client interactions, closer to areas where errors carry real consequences, closer to areas where if something goes wrong, the exposure isn't just operational. And the same organization that moved carefully and precisely on the first project moves fast on the second one, because they believe they already know how to do this. That's where AI security stops being a checkbox and becomes a genuine risk management decision. Deploying AI into processes that touch sensitive data or that interface with clients in regulated contexts without understanding the attack surface of those systems, that's not just a technical oversight. It's a liability that doesn't show up until it's too late to address quietly. The early win made the organization feel ready. Being ready and feeling ready are not the same thing. So what's the actual takeaway here? Not that early wins are bad. They're necessary. They build internal credibility, prove out the mechanics, and create the momentum that allows more complex projects to happen. But they have to be interpreted correctly. The win is data, not a mandate, not a benchmark, not a promise. It tells you that under specific conditions, a specific application of AI produced a specific result. Your job after the first win is to understand what those conditions were and to build a framework for replicating them. Not the outcome, the conditions. The companies that get this right become genuinely good at deploying AI over time, not because they have better technology, because they have better organizational understanding of how AI actually works inside complex human systems. The companies that get it wrong keep running the same failure cycle: early enthusiasm, expanded ambition, unexpected friction, blame, retreat, until the whole initiative stalls. And the frustrating part is that the stall almost always looks like a technology problem. It never is. If what I described today sounds like something you're seeing inside your company, whether you're in the middle of that first win or already managing the fallout from a second project that didn't land the way you expected, you can book a free call with me.